Good morning. Thank you for patiently waiting while I got today's show together today. And thank you for everybody who's in my live chat who has been keeping the conversation going while I got everything together. So today I wanted to go over some updates. Sorry, my dog is really harassing me right now. Today I wanted to go over updates on the court documents. And we've touched base on the first document drop, but there have been more documents since I was live, and it's just brought up a ton of questions in my comment section, in Discord, in the live chats. And I just thought that we'd go over all of that today. And I was going to read you a few sections of the motion to compel that was recently filed. So first off, good morning to the live chat. Cyber Ninja, Joey, Mike, Heather, Christy, D Square, Jeremiah, Twiz, Sirius Black, thanks for being here, and Nina, Anna Melodies. I'm just gonna see if I missed anything. Aquarius, yay 420. I just didn't want to miss anybody. So I'm going to start by bringing up this first document. I think I could have done a little bit better with the outfit today. Sorry, guys. I was more research-based today. Let me pull up this first document. We're going to start with the biggest part of the new documents that were dropped, which is this memorandum supportive of the maybe the first page so you can see what I'm looking at. All right, so this is the memorandum in support of the motion to change a venue. And we think of the normal arguments in this particular document, like say, for instance, we're just talking about bias or public bias, but there were several things mentioned in here that I just kind of perked my interest. And I wanted to start by bringing them to you. And then building on that was the conversation in Discord. And I had a lot of people talking about information that I'm going to share with you as well. I'm kind of talking like a robot, sorry. So I'm going to start by showing you something on this document on page 11. And I think if I was to kind of just categorize this show today and tell you what we're talking about, this show is basically talking about Brian's constitutional rights. I don't think there's anything that I'm talking about today that isn't sort of grouped into that Fourth and Sixth Amendment rights that we all hope for a fair and free judicial system in our country. So that's really the subject that we're touching base on today. So let me go to page 11. I just realized I forgot to put on lipstick. It was a rough morning, sorry. I'm going to page 11. And so what I'm reading you is the, down here under part 2, change of venue necessary and appropriate pursuant of the statute and rule. I've highlighted a couple things here. So we're going to read these 2 paragraphs because this gets into some of BK's constitutional rights. And I actually had never heard this argument this way until they put it in this memorandum. So this is interesting, and maybe you'll find it interesting to you too. So we'll start here. Another consideration for this court pursuant to Idaho Code 19-1801. And before we go on, I am going to show you that code because it tells you what we're talking about. It basically is the code saying that they have the right to throw. Well, I'll just read it to you. So section 19-1801 is grounds for removal. So a criminal action prosecuted by indictment may be removed from the court in which it is pending, and in the application of the defendant, on the ground that fair and impartial trial cannot be held in a county where the indictment is pending. And then it gives the case history. So just so you know what we're talking about in terms of BK's constitutional rights. So let me go on. After consideration for this court pursuant in Idaho Code 19-1801 is that Chief Fry is running for Latah County Sheriff. Chief Fry is a witness in this case. He has engaged in extensive media statements. If he is elected, his position statutorily gives him power to summons jurors if directed to do so, and to be in charge of the implementation of JURG, and it gives another code. If he is elected, a conflict is created and the statutory duty to be in charge of an impaneled jury where he is a witness in the case. This is one of those interest of justice factors that supports a venue change out of the Latah County. And I'm going to read you the conclusion because this kind of sets us up for the rest of what I'm going to read you. So this is no ordinary case. Brian Kohlberger accused of killing 4 individuals. The state seeks the death penalty. If the trial should result in conviction as such, Mr. Kohlberger's constitutional rights must be carefully guarded. Rarely does even a small community come together in both number and quality of the unity. I can't read with these blue blocker glasses on. Together in both number and quality of the unity as has happened here. Latah County is, in all regards, a nice, quaint, close-knit community that sticks together. While in a small, close-knit community, it is what is hoped for a small town, constitutional rights must still be carefully protected. Mr. Kohlberger has the right of presumption of innocence. He is guaranteed the protection of fair jury and due process of law. Given the levels of bias in Latah County, Mr. Kohlberger cannot receive a fair trial. An impartial jury in this community cannot be picked. The court must protect Mr. Kohlberger's constitutional rights and grant a change of venue. And before I go on to the rest of this, I just want to check the chat, because the next thing I want to do is actually, just because not everybody in our audience is familiar with true crime or the judicial system in general. So next I am going to read you what your 6th Amendment rights are and your 4th Amendment rights, but particularly your 6th Amendment rights. You do have a right in this country to face your accuser in layman's terms. And I think that a lot of this kind of feels like that in this case. I just want to check out the chat here. Hold on a second. Representing. I'm just seeing if anyone's weighed in. I guess what I'm kind of seeing is, have any of you guys heard of this conflict of interest where this might be a violation of BK's constitutional rights because he's a witness and he's oversees the jury? It's interesting. I just never heard that argument before. I know I have a couple wrenches. I have some really great subscribers and members I'm going to be making into mods soon. I just haven't gotten my new wrenches out yet. Hold on. Sounds like, whoops, sorry. That was about somebody's music. I'm going to get to the bottom of the comments. I thought you guys would be igniting the comments about, okay. I don't know. Let's read the sentence again, Twiz. It says, Chief Fry is a witness in this case. Wait, hold on. He is engaged in extensive media statements. If he is elected, his position statutorily gives him the power to summon jurors if directed to do so. There we go. And be in charge of an impaneled jury. So if and when, in this case, it got to the point where they had to summon jurors, Fry is also a witness. And if he was elected, it would create a conflict of interest. So I think that addressing it now is saying, let's just take care of this before it goes, before he gets elected or this goes to trial, because this will create a conflict of interest. So let's take care of it now. I think that's what it's saying. Absolutely. And I've had more than one person. I know Sarge hasn't been here since he sent me a letter telling me to focus more on the court document. So, I'm trying to do something. Heather says he would literally be in charge of the county jail. A satchel of wrenches. Okay. Oh, don't say it. And D Square says, as the face to media, he is also promoted, given statements if he is on a jury. Okay, let's go on. I want to tell you real quick, again, just for the people who don't have that info right at the, let's talk about what our rights are, what they're referencing specifically. I think I'm going to stop the camera and put on some lipstick. Let's find this. All right, so let's read the Fourth Amendment and then we'll read the Sixth Amendment. So right here, your Fourth Amendment in the United States Constitution is part of the Bill of Rights. It prohibits unreasonable searches and seizures and sets requirements for using warrants. Warrants must be issued by a judge or magistrate to justify probable cause, supported by an oath or affirmation, and must be particularly described the place to be searched and the persons or things to be seized. Fourth Amendment case law deals with three main issues: what government activities are searches and seizures, what constitutes probable cause to conduct searches and seizures, and how to address violations of the Fourth Amendment rights. Early court decisions limited the amendment's scope to physical intrusion of property or persons. But the Supreme Court held out after a case in 1967 that its protections extend to intrusions on privacy of individuals as well as to physical locations. A warrant is needed for most searches and seizures, but the court has carved out a series of exceptions for consent searches, motor vehicle searches, blah, 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 blah. So this would pertain to how they got when we bring up the Fourth Amendment, it talks about how they actually got how they collected the evidence. So was that legally obtained? I am going to go back to the original document after I read this, because it does touch base a little bit more on why there's no reasonable exception. Let me take this down for a second. There's no reasonable exception of privacy to whoever provided that IGG to the crime scene. And I'll work off of that a little bit more in a second. Let me pull up your Sixth Amendment rights. This is interesting. So the Sixth Amendment to the United States Constitution sets 4 rights related to criminal prosecutions. It was ratified in 1791 as part of the United States Bill of Rights. The Supreme Court has applied all but one of these amendments protections to the United States through the Due Process Clause of the 14th Amendment. The Sixth Amendment guarantees criminal defendants 9 rights, including the right to a speedy trial and public trial by an impartial jury consisting of jurors from the state's district in which the crime was alleged to have been committed. Under impartial jury requirements, juries must be unbiased, and the jury must consist and be representative of a cross-section of the community. The rights to a jury applies only to offenses in which the penalty of imprisonment, okay, and the rest of it is just elaborating more. So I just wanted to clear those up before we went on. Hold on. Are we talking? No. Well, no. No, but there are some okay, so we're not necessarily talking fake DNA today, but we are talking about unknown DNA today, because there wasn't just one sample of DNA at the crime scene. And I always thought there were 2 unknown DNAs. There's actually 3. Cyber Ninja says, did they get a warrant to steal the trash for DNA match and I didn't see it. Actually, I have a copy of that warrant. I wasn't going to bring it up, but I do have it up here. I found a great new website. I was referred to by one of my subscribers. So Matt or Josh from at Homeland Security, which I've linked in the description below, he showed me a great website called Scribd, where we can go in. And so these documents are basically sealed in Idaho, but at different times they're unsealed in different states. So you can go in and like get different documents from different states. So it's a really good resource. Linked it below if you want to check it out. But I do have a search warrant that we can pull that up. I just don't know quite where to find that. So it will touch base on it though when we get back to this memorandum, this 319-page memorandum. Heather says, false facts matches well with false DNA. And Sirius Black says, I think I had about, oh, sorry about that. D Square says, Heather, you are right. He would have a differing rule. He cannot manage jails and probably not impartial, nor be considered a bailiff sheriff's shop. And Paco's here and he says, wait, what? All right, let me go on. So let me bring the memorandum back up. So I don't know. I thought it was really interesting. And then we're going to go back down to the next time that Chief Payne was actually mentioned in this. And this is the same time where they mentioned the DNA. Well, and I want to stop my camera for a second. Okay. So in this memorandum, if you skip forward to page 169, oops. So what we're looking at here are discussions about, oops, let me take Twiz's comment down. We're talking about discussions of change of venue. That's this whole section with these like, listed different things. And in this list that I'm about to read you, I'm going to set it up and it mentions Fry again in here. So, and again, this is page 169. During a December 30th, 2022 press conference, which was live streamed on YouTube, Chief of Police James Fry and Latah County Prosecutor Bill Thompson announced that Brian Kohlberger had been arrested. Although a few details were released, Mr. Thompson pointed out to the media that the probable cause affidavit in which would be released after Kohlberger's extradition from Pennsylvania, with the court issuing a gag order in an attempt to protect the defendant's due process rights. The media drew heavily from the document and widely reported on purported, that's a typo, I guess, reported on purported evidence, connecting Brian Kohlberger to these murders. And that includes the DNA in the cell phone tower specifically. These details were widely disseminated and discussed by the media for 16 months without any debate over their veracity. Only during April 2024 hearing regarding the defense's change of venue survey did Mr. Thompson state in open court that many of these representations, which were tested in the survey, were false or may not be offered at trial. And then you can see I've highlighted this in orange because I thought it was important. Despite the court's best efforts to stem the flow of prejudice of information to the public, Latah County residents have been saturated with the deluge of details pulled from the affidavit, warrants, and other documents that were not filed under seal. Much of this coverage has the potential to undermine the presumption of innocence. And that's the key thing here. That's what we're talking about with Brian's constitutional rights. It's a fair trial we're looking for. And shift the burden of proof onto the defendant. The media details evidence allegedly linking Brian Kohlberger to the murders, including cell tower data tracking his movements, video footage of the reported killer's car near the victim's home, and alleged DNA match with more than a 99.9 likelihood of connecting Kohlberger to the crime scene. Evidence confiscated from Kohlberger's home and car, and eyewitness accounts from the victim's roommates. Examples of this type of prejudice coverage include, and we're not going to go through all of them because honestly, this is there's 30 pages of different talking point or bullet points that they made here. But I did highlight the ones that had to do with DNA or IgG. And actually, IgG is only mentioned once in this chain of different items. Well, Bonnie says, Fry involved many individuals allegedly involved, and Brian K is innocent, and those keep saying he's guilty. Sister and steering people from finding the truth no matter. Yes, this is the 319-page memorandum. And what we're reading right now, Twiz, is the section on media analysis. So that starts around page 169, and it's probably a 40-page section. I don't know. I lost track. Sorry. All right, so let me skip down to the things that pertain to DNA and RNA, and then I'm going to bring you back to, like I was mentioning before, that the unsealed, some of these unsealed documents that you can now find online. Cyber Ninja says, improving analysis for trace DNA evidence. Read this. No way BK did. BK did. Hey, Regina. And then Nietzsche says, I don't think Boise will be fair to Brian. Dylan's from there. You know, what's interesting is they gave some statistics on this, and I wasn't prepared to talk about it, so I'm not going to speak on them specifically. But when they speak in terms of media coverage, okay, in this document, in this new memorandum, they do show extreme, ridiculous more coverage in Latah County than where Boise's located. And the percentage is so drastic. It was close. I think it was over 30% media coverage for the Idaho 4 case in Latah County. But then when you move over another county, it's 2.5%. And that's representative of most of the counties in Idaho. So there is, although yes, it's very close to home, and I would tend to agree with you. Statistically, what they found, the defense has hired people. What they found is that there is a much greater chance of less bias according to media coverage, just media coverage in general in the local news. Anyway, I don't know if that helps in any way. I read that in this document. Oh, wait, hold on, what? That was presented and some ignored because they'd be unsealed somewhere. All right, let's go on. So I'm going to let's get the memorandum pulled back up. The next section I'm going to read is, it looks long, but it's not. Hold on, that was page 173. Oh, here we go. So again, this list that we're looking at is discussion of change of venue, and then they go into detail. These are the details about media analysis. Let's make sure there aren't any headers. Okay. So let me read these different places where they're analyzing the DNA or IgG in terms of change of venue and protecting BK's constitutional rights. So let me read these all down to you, and then we'll transition into what I think is kind of the most interesting thing I have for you. Okay. So 1, the leather knife sheath. These are the different details they glean from the survey or this is discussion about change of venue. These are the media analysis bullet points. So a leather sheet from a combat knife was located next to Madison's Mogan's body, and that was in the red affidavit. They cite where this was brought into the media. The police found a leather tam knife sheath laying next to Mogan's right side. The sheath had a K-bar UMC United States Marine Corps Eagle logo and anchor insignia stamped on the outside. The DNA on the knife sheath was key evidence that led to Kohlberger's arrest in December. According to the judge's order, genetic genealogy, IgG, was used to construct a family tree of people whose DNA matched with the DNA found on the knife sheath at the King Road home. DNA was found on the knife sheath found next to Madison Mogan's body. The knife was stamped with the K-bar United States Marine logo insignia. The knife sheath was sent to the Idaho State Crime Lab, where was isolated male DNA sample was retrieved. Officers in Pennsylvania recovered trash from Kohlberger's family residence on December 27th, through which the ISL was able to make a DNA profile. The DNA showed a 99% match, showing the DNA from the family home was likely the father of the suspect. The Idaho State Crime Lab found a single source DNA on the button snap of the knife sheath. Police believe that Kohlberger's DNA Police believe this is Kohlberger's DNA after comparing the DNA evidence police obtained from the trash at Kohlberger's parents' house 2 days before he was arrested. Local police found that the knife sheath at the Kohlberger residence at the home in Moscow, where the victims were found stabbed to death on November 13th, a single source male DNA that is produced to believe belongs to Kohlberger was found at that on that sheath. Investigators found DNA that they believed to belong to a man accused of stabbing 4 University of Idaho students to death in their home while killings took place. The DNA was found in the snap of the leather knife sheath at the. See, these are like all different. Oh, here we go. The DNA found in Kohlberger's trash matches. These are, you guys, I really don't want to bore you with all the details, but you're getting the point. Hold on. Let me see if I have any new comments. Hold on. And the transcript read out loud. Yeah. D-Score says, different time. But not even OJ's jury selection team created such a stir. They probably called that tonight. I want to show you guys something else before I bring up the next document. So when I was trying to understand this document, I just kind of bouncing it off different people that I know. And one of the resources I had was a document that was sent to me by my mod, Mikey, and I've linked his channel below. And I'm going to show this to you right now. So this is the law enforcement FGG, basically a defensive handbook. So how to fight genetic genealogy, basically. And I mean, it would seem that Ann Taylor has followed this to this point to a T. I'm going to read you this whole paragraph, but we're going to, obviously the purple highlighted part is what we're focusing on. Let me read this to you. So, how forensic genetic genealogy, or FGG, searches work. Law enforcement FGG investigators tend to follow a typical pattern. Police investigators contract with an individual, frequently called a genetic genealogist, although there are currently no standardized training for that position, or a private company to conduct an FGG search. This individual or company may be employed by or independent from the genetic genealogy services hosting the database of users and DNA data. The investigator provides a genetic genealogy either with a sample of DNA found at the crime scene or with data generated from the sample. And then this is the highlighted part. The genetic genealogist then uploads the DNA data either under a pseudonym or via a private law enforcement account to one or more of the genetic genealogy services like GED Match. These sites' algorithms will identify biological relatives and predict how distant or close these relatives are from forensic sample. This will result in a list of names and identified information using this list. The genetic genealogist will conduct a traditional genealogy search through public records, social media, and other sources to build a family tree and try to narrow down the potential suspects. They will look for relatives who are around the same age as the perpetrator and who were likely to have been in that general location at the time the crime occurred. The genetic genealogist will compile a report that indicates the names, the potential. Oh, I just got a text. I thought I was on mute. Sorry, I have mute PTSD. The genetic genealogist will compile a report that includes names of potential near the distant relatives of the forensic DNA sample with the prediction of the relatives. If the police have contracted with a company that is called, we're going to stop there. So why am I bringing this up? Well, I mean, I think you probably have an idea why I'm bringing it up, but there's a couple questions that are basically coming to my mind when I look at this, and I want to pose them to you before I keep reading on. So, first off, one thing that was pointed out to me that I don't understand, and I would love people, I know, mute please, right? And I would love for somebody in the audience or someone with the knowledge on this to explain to me. But from what I understand from this just like preliminary research, it takes like oh, my screen is frozen. It takes like 30 days to do this genealogy work. How do they do it so fast? That's a really interesting question that seems to keep coming up by the people who are looking at this. They just wonder, how did they get that match so quickly? Like even cold cases or really highly important cases just don't typically come back that quick. There's somebody highlighting a comment up here. Was this not the back door by having a citizen tree builder bringing the FBI to BK's dad, and they get BK and are able to get a swab in custody? Honestly, in my opinion, not all through and through. I think, but I have a more problem with, and I don't quite understand the process well enough to speak on it. There are some written things in one of these documents I'm about to pull up that do touch base on it legally, but the part of DNA that is used in CODIS, okay, it's the part that they used is non-coded DNA from the human genome, so it's part of the DNA, and the statistics that they give are representative. It sounds like, here, hold on a second. Let me pull up the information so I'm not speaking like a robot. All right, so let me back up for 1 second here. So early on, we heard Bill Thompson say that he wasn't going to be using DNA or IgG in this case. Let me pull up this unredacted document that I just took a look at recently. It's called, this one is the Unredacted Protective Order. it I'm just reading the comments. I'm sorry. They wouldn't. Hold on 1 second. I'm getting my notes up because I don't want to, this gets like really complex, you guys. And since I am literally just an ASMR YouTuber, I don't like speaking without my notes because I just don't want to misspeak on this really complicated stuff. But this version that was released in October of 2023 is odd because it suggests that the prosecution has been sharing information with the defense. So it's a bit perplexing. And the person who gave me this information says it makes them scratch their head wondering if it's a misdirection or it's just confusion in the mix. Let me read you page 14. Let me pull this up. So why would they, let me just kind of like speak off the cuff here. Why would they not be talking about those unknown sources? Like, we haven't heard more about them. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, if they were relevant to the case, why, what we would have known if they were another perpetrator. We just have so many questions about this unknown DNA. But stop my camera. It's part of the discovery process for the defendant to have everything, and they can determine whether something is exculpatory. Whose DNA is that? Like, oh, my hair. Whose DNA is that? I guess that's how I'm going to set this segment up. Let me just read it to you, and then so hopefully be a little clearer. So there are two things I'm going to read you. I'm going to read you something I highlighted on page 14, and then we're going to go to the exhibits, and I'm going to try to answer that question of whose DNA could this unknown DNA be? Heather says, the IGG is technical. It's similar concept to the cast. It's something done in the course of an investigation, but secondary to what is required to prove guilt or innocence. The guy from Orthram picked it out of the garbage at Brian's dad's in November, brought it to the lab and tested it allegedly. That's the crazy thing, though, is like, it apparently takes a month to get these results back. So how did it happen so fast? Yeah. Cyber Ninja says, that house was cleaned well before calling 911. If only 3 were found there, recall. And, this is a speculatory show. So let me just put a little banner down there saying that everything we say is speculation, opinion, and reaction. All right, let me grab some more comments, and then I'm going to get to, I feel like this is the most interesting thing that we're going to read here. Miss Potts says, I like your new profile picture too, Miss Potts. Sounds like the DNA belongs to the male son of Michael Kohlberger. They would know that if they stole the dad's trash and compared it to the DNA sheet. Or like, even if we're not talking in terms of illegally obtaining evidence or talking in terms of planting just in general, if you're only matching part of the DNA, I mean, that figure, that whatever 5.27 octillion, it's not meant to be representative of the entire sample of like a buccal swab of someone. It's only representative of a small sample that is non-coded DNA from the human genome. So it's the statistic, if you really think about it in a nuanced way, is misleading. Cyber Ninja says you can get a rapid test for testing for touch, but to link Brian to his dad, the sequence takes days. And Heather says, right, they took the Kohlberger's family trash, but probably not the neighbor. WSU Mom Kim says, a family member may have given a sample to the FBI in PA. Now that's an interesting twist. They didn't put it in the PCA, but that's an interesting. So many people don't understand. State wants it this way, so people believe their narrative. Okay, Heather says, oh, this is a good point. Heather brought this up in Discord yesterday. I'm glad you rewrote it. She brought this up in fact, I could just bring up your comments from last night because I felt like I had some really good Idaho 4 brainiacs talking about this stuff. Anyway, but let me read what Heather says. Think bone marrow transplant. Some people are matches, some aren't. But those who are not complete matches to your DNA. So I think you're supposed to be asleep right now. And whoops, Miss Potts says, the only way they match it so quickly is because they used a loophole. The loophole Gabby Vargas said that they used in court. I'm going to give you a star. I didn't know Gabby Vargas actually said they used a loophole. I did hear her say I didn't hear her say, but I thought her implication, and this might be what you're talking about, Ms. Potts, is that these sites, you have to opt in whether you're going to share your DNA or not, like your results of your DNA or not. And many people opt out for privacy reasons, but allegedly there's a way that law enforcement can press some sort of button in the background, so to speak, and they can pull up a full list. If I'm not mistaken, I think that was one of the, and I'm saying it in like layman's terms, but I think that's one of the arguments I did hear when Gabby Vargas was, I think she was on Truth Transparency. They got a warrant for trash. Why not get a warrant for DNA? I don't think they had to get a warrant for the trash, but I don't know. Warrant for the DNA. Well, that's an interesting thing. I think they do touch base on that because they do talk about reasonable expectations of privacy. If you leave your own DNA at the crime scene, you have no expectations of privacy. Because talking about obtaining evidence. So I think that they mean obtaining the information about that DNA. They wouldn't need a warrant for that. It's one of the explanations. They can expedite some, but not that quickly. Thank you for being here, Miss Anonymous, by the way. That's my dog snoring, if anyone's wondering what that noise is. I'm sorry. In my opinion, I just believe it's just not full. They got BKs. Whoops, I'm sorry, bring it up. WSU Mom Kim says they don't have to put it in the PCA and they aren't using it at trial or fighting it. That's really interesting, WSU Mom Kim. I'm giving you a star. So I remember to go look that up again. I I'm just going to bring up what Twiz said. I mean, he's obviously just remarking back to Heather, but this is actually an interesting way to think about this, guys. So Twiz says to Heather, have you heard about if you get a bone marrow transplant, your DNA is now in the person's marrow and that you got, and I don't know what he's about to say, but it's an interesting way of putting it, just to build on what Heather is saying. Like when they're looking for that bone marrow match, they're not going to match your DNA to somebody else who has a matched DNA. They're going to match your blood type and your genetics, but they're not going to match the DNA. So you can have genetic markers and matchings to someone without being like whatever. Warning label Nina says, Vargas said there is a loophole, not that they used a loophole. That's a starable comment as well, Nina. Thank you. WSU Mom Kim, I can't help but wonder if they had it because his friends who OD'd in PA. The DNA? I don't know, but Brian, we've really looked at the records. It doesn't appear that Brian ever had any like run-ins with law enforcement in PA, except for this one time that he locked his bike or his car, got locked behind a gate when he was hiking at night, and he had to call 911 to have them get it out. But they couldn't find anything. They couldn't even find record of his alleged incident where he stole his sister's phone. But I don't know. And then D Square says, true. I was going to be donating an organ 80+%. You want to have, I should read over here. You want to have a live organ when going through the process. Interesting. I didn't know that. Too Fast says, yes, bone marrow transplants, blood transfusions, and some organ transplants will cause your blood for a period of time to show two different DNA profiles. That's crazy. I should bring up the Daniel clip because last time I talked about this subject, I was on DTS and he brought up like a debate between him and Gabby Vargas and Lana from Truth Transparency. But I have so much to go over. I don't know if we have time for that. And then Miss Potts says, yes. And Ellie will also, in cases where someone has opted out, upload a profile as though they are the user and hide that. It would likely have been found by the FBI or the DEA at her crime scene. Oh. So maybe they're thinking they had an unknown. That's actually a really interesting thought. Okay. So if you don't know who Ashley Flugel is, she was a friend of BK's. They unfortunately had an addiction problem together and she passed on. This is before, obviously this is before Brian went to DeSales University and for his graduate program. Anyway, she overdosed on heroin and allegedly BK was one of the last people at the scene. So what Kim is suggesting is maybe they collected DNA samples back then and they had an unknown sample. And once they were able to match this DNA, maybe they found a match in Pennsylvania when they ran it through. Although the only thing I would say is I would think that DNA was entered into a database already. So I don't know if like unknown DNAs are entered into CODIS or whatever, but I wonder if they like they would have made a match before they had to compare. Oh, I don't know. Kim, that's a great idea. We're gonna star that and keep it in the discussion. Richie Rich says, they do not need a warrant if they are interrogating you. You can deny it and say, I'm scared you're going to clone my DNA. So trash is for them to get free. Miss Potts says, I was wondering, weird to me, it says predict. Nishi says, Brian apparently did an ancestry DNA test, so he would know it was obtained illegally because he would have said no to use it when he took the test. That's a good one, Nietzsche. Good thought. Oh my gosh, they're still talking about the blood marrow, and typically Unique says, yes, my son's hair texture changed and his blood type changed. That's wild. I didn't know it was possible to change your blood type. I have a really rare blood type and it's annoying, and I didn't know it was possible. WSU Mom Kim says, that's true, Twiz. Your DNA changes. But did he have a bone marrow transplant? Heather says, they are using the sheath profile at trial. They are not using the work done that built the fam tree /IgG. It is not material to this case. In itself is not evidence of a crime. Which is a good way to kind of like end the conversation. But what about those unknown DNAs? What is that? Look in a second. And Nina says, I have theories, speculations, assumptions, and options. No facts are known yet, except Maddie, Kaylee, Ethan, and Xana were unalive. And Richie Rich says, if you apply to become a police officer, aren't you supposed to give DNA so they can do a background check? The only thing I would say is BK didn't want to be a police officer. He wanted to be a scientist. It's true. And WSU Mom Kim says, yes, at the crime scene, when going through taking samples. Ms. Potts says, if you listen back to Gabby's testimony, she made it clear Ellie uses the loophole often for those who've opted out. They avoid the Ellie fee too. They know IgG won't be used, so they abuse the loophole. Oh, thanks for becoming a new member. Brian also said he did a genealogy test. He did. Do you remember where you saw that documented, Kim? I'd love to know. Simply for the fact if there's some sort of like other writings from BK or something else out there that I haven't read, I'd love to know. So Exhibit A is Payne stating his opinions. Well, he is not just stating his. It's a sworn affidavit. So he should be saying these things under oath of penalty and perjury. I don't know how to categorize if opinions and statements from the roommate. It should be. I don't know. WSU Mom Kim. He was subjected. No, I'm sorry. WSU Mom Kim. He was suspected in PA but ruled out. So no reason for DNA allegedly. And WSU Mom Kim says, remember, he told his neighbor about it in Pullman. Okay, so this gets back to the statistics that we were talking about, that I was telling you we were talking about in Discord last night. So Heather says, everyone is overlooking the real issue at hand. The sheath profile is partial or incomplete. So let's bring up another document. So remember we mentioned that this was that document from October. Oops. Come on. So this is the motion for protective order. Hold on one second. I just want to make sure my camera's off, and it's not, of course. I'm going to go to page 12, just in case any of you are looking up. And again, I linked this below. So if you want to go check out these documents for yourself, see what you can find in them, please go use I listed my resources. I also said who was helping me with the work in case you have questions for them. But I'm going to start on page 11. I said 12, but if you go to page 11 right here, it starts talking about Rule 16b-4 does not require the disclosure of IgG information because IgG information does not satisfy any of the required data. So this is just getting to what Heather is saying a little bit. And maybe I will bring up some statistics after this and just take a minute to maybe try and put this in like a, I don't know, like a visual perspective for you. I'm gonna put some damn lipstick on. Oh, damn it. Okay. So starting here, again, the title of this is Rule 16b-4 does not require the disclosure of IgG information because IgG information does not satisfy any of the required criteria. The nature of IgG information is such that, and again, this is one of the court documents in Brian's case. The nature of IgG information is such that disclosure is not required under Rule 16b-4. The rule requires the disclosure of books, papers, documents, photographs, tangible objects, and buildings or places only when, one, the material are material to the preparation of the defense, or two, are intended to be used for prosecution as evidence at trial, or obtained from or three, were obtained from the defendant or belong to the defendant. The IgG information does not satisfy these criteria. So again, this is the argument for not turning over some of this information, which it kind of sounded like they had. So it's very head scratching and perplexing what they're talking about. So it goes on to say, first, the IgG information was not material to the preparation of the defense. Defendant will be charged in the killing of 4 people, not with being related to a particular person. This mere fact that uploading the complete S&P profile into the publicly available genetic genealogy service led law enforcement to relatives of the defendant does not affect the strength of the evidence against him. The strength of the evidence against the defendant in terms of DNA evidence depends upon the confirmatory result of the SCR and DNA analysis between defendant DNA profile and the DNA recovered from the K-bar knife sheath, as explained forth below. The state intends to introduce the SDR profile analysis at trial and does not intend to enter any of the evidence pertaining to the development of the SMP profile or the tree building process for, it says inculpatory, but I think it meant I don't know if inculpatory is a word, maybe exculpatory purposes. The state has disclosed or will disclose the information it has related to the SDR DNA analysis conducted in connection with the case. The immateriality of the IgG information to the preparation of the defense, perhaps best understood by way of analogy. The tip that came from the IgG process is no different than any other types of technical hits that put law enforcement on the trail of a suspect. And one of those that we talk about sometimes is like, for instance, lie detector tests. That's a good example of another that they're inadmissible in court, but it is a tool when you can't find the person, it is a tool that law enforcement uses. So I've been told it's quite similar to that. Again, the immateriality of the IgG information, the preparation of the defense, perhaps best understood with way of an analogy. The tip came from the IgG process is no different than any other types of technology hits that are put by law enforcement on the trail of the suspect. And then it cites case law. For example, in Johnson, law enforcement recovered a suspect's DNA from a ball cap left at the scene of a bank robbery. So these are some of the things that are excluded. Some of the reasons why we might be seeing why these other samples are unknown, and like the wording of this example that was put forth by the prosecution, I think kind of speaks volumes as to why we're not seeing this unknown DNA. And you can take this information however you interpret it, but it's saying that it's law enforcement's DNA. I think that's what this means. Let me read this next sentence to you. So right here, let me highlight it so you guys can see where, you probably can't see that. Let me try putting this on full screen for you. Take down Heather's comment. So it's this line right here. I highlighted a different color. Law enforcement ran the DNA profile through CODIS, which is the result of multiple hits, including the defendant. A scientist narrowed down the hits to the defendant, and law enforcement confirmed that it was the defendant's DNA after acquiring a buccal slab from the defendant. The defendant moved to compel the other CODIS. I'm going to stop highlighting this. This is taking too long. The court explained that the DNA evidence material to the defense was the direct comparison between DNA on the hat and the DNA taken directly from the defendant. The fact that this isn't where I thought it was. I'm sorry. I'll get to it when I get to the exhibits. The fact that the defendant was the first identified as the possible. Oh, God. Heather's sending me something. Hold on one second. Okay, guys, this is about something else. Sorry about that. All right. Here, the IgG information, like the initial CODIS hits, is not material to the preparation of the defense because it shows the defendant was the first identified as the possible suspect. Moreover, the IgG information could not support the argument from the defendant that law enforcement violated his Fourth Amendment rights by entering the DNA collection from the K-bar knife sheath into the genealogy service. The defendant cannot prove a violation of Fourth Amendment right without showing he or she had a reasonable expectation of privacy in the place of the search. The K-bar knife sheath was abandoned at the scene and the DNA was inside of it. The defendant cannot show that he had reasonable expectation of privacy in the DNA left at the scene of a quadruple homicide in the genetic information of his relatives who voluntarily provided their DNA to genealogy service. So I guess they're just getting into semantics now. So they're saying if you voluntarily gave your DNA, regardless of anything else, and combined with the fact that he left his DNA there, he is no expectations of privacy. If he leaves his DNA at the crime scene, he's foregone his right to privacy with that DNA. I don't know how far that extends. Does that also extend to the relatives? And it also sounds like in this one part here, they're also saying that even if they opted in or opted out, they voluntarily gave their DNA to a genetic testing service. So this isn't all I have to say, but I just want to pause here just to look and see if I had any more comments to bring up here. I really think I think they had his DNA, or you have to give them DNA sample if you want to join the police force so they can run through a background search. I mean, I can see where this argument is being placed up. People are confused how they quickly got that profile. How did they get results to that so fast? So people keep going back to, okay, well, did they have a sample on hand? You know, maybe he was a suspect. Did they, like Richie Rich says, allegedly have some sort of sample from some job he applied for at some point, or some sort of work he was doing, even if it was, you know, like an internship or something. Maybe he did provide a DNA sample. Maybe they had the ability to start ahead of time and then they verified it with something else. I don't know. It doesn't sound like that from the PCA. I think we really dove into that grand jury in Pennsylvania in the last live stream, Kim. I don't know if you caught it, but it appears in, you know, the chat can correct me if I'm wrong, but it appears the only thing that grand jury in Pennsylvania had to do with was another missing persons case. And when they were going over the MO, so to speak, of BK, this was one of the things that they thought possibly they should look deeper into. And so as far as I know, his parents were testifying regarding that person that they knew, but it's an interesting thought. You know, maybe there's something we don't know about the grand jury, but as far as I know, they were two completely different cases. They would have no reason to even test it. Test what, Heather? Sorry, that's an old comment, but test what? I don't know, Regina, but that's what we're hearing in the chat, that he did say he gave, to his neighbor? Brian said that he did. Yeah. So he said that to his neighbor. Okay, at least that's someplace where I can start looking. All right. No FBI or DEA involved in Ashley's case. Do they have to have FBI or DEA? I'm just curious. I don't know this. Like I said, this is my first true crime case. Do they have to have FBI or DEA involved to take forensics? I don't know. Okay, so typically unique says, right, Heather, that's why we were discussing what partial components, markers, etc., could be compared to the BMT markers. I don't understand why they had to go to Pennsylvania to collect the DNA. I mean, you remember how in that search warrant they said if the DNA, it's like page 15 of the search warrant, they talk about how if the DNA proves to be exculpatory, or if the DNA, blah, 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 it was just so like rhetorical, and like, it was like talking in a circle. You'll see it on the page 15 of that search warrant. I wonder. So like, I don't think that whatever sample they had or obtained through doing the genetic genealogy, I mean, I think that's just what we're saying. It can't be used in court. It's like a lie detector test or something like that. So they couldn't use the sample that they had because they didn't match it to actual DNA from a person. They matched it from going backwards through his family tree and distant relatives and people in the location, and they found the most probable person that it could be. And it's a pretty solid way of doing it. It feels like it's an inarguable thing, but it's not, and it's not like foolproof. That's why they need that DNA buccal swab, which they are now using for the full-fledged sample to match them to the knife sheath. But back in Pennsylvania, They couldn't ask him to give a DNA sample, at least without tipping him off. They had to get it from someone. And maybe they tried, if they were following him since the 12th, maybe they followed him all around. Maybe they followed him to that Thai restaurant in Indiana. Who knows? But they weren't able to get it any other way, so they had to go into the trash. That's as far as we know. It was one of his relatives that did a test, and that's how they matched him. But this is the first I've heard that BK did a test too. Hey, Jane, thanks for being here. If you use steroids, your DNA changes? I do not know. Too fast. D squared says, in the USA, people don't commonly register blood product DNA for donation. And WSU Mom Kim says, my husband too. He always gets called to donate. He must be, what is it? He just must be O neg, or just plain O. Every single thing you've said about BK stalking, knowing victims, rolling crime scene cars, cell phone tower pings, DNA, all a lie. Defense will prove that. That is sketch, in my opinion. Regina says, yes, that's why I think he knows they shouldn't have got his DNA from the site. I see. So I don't know if you guys are seeing this because you saw it recorded somewhere, or this is just a reasonable deduction saying, well, why would he fight back so hard and say, no, you obtained this illegally, if maybe he had checked a box saying. But the one thing is, how would he know if any of his relatives had done the same? Because you have so many distant relatives. How would you know if all of them hadn't? Heather says, even if he did participate in a consumer genetic mapping kit, it clearly wasn't one of those ones that Ellie accessed, and he didn't opt in. And WSU Mom Kim says, maybe they did labs for school, like nurses too. That's a really good. You guys, this is how I know my blood type. I'm just going to just interject a little story here. So, although I've never been employed as a phlebotomist, I am an excellent trained phlebotomist if there's ever a crisis and one is needed. But part of my training was a pretty intensive program. So I had like 8 weeks of lab work. And then I had like 8 weeks of like internship and training. But part of my lab work was we would practice stuff on each other when we were learning. So there, like, a classroom had a built-in lab and had all these machines, and we learned how to do all the different testing. And it was my turn one night, and I had to give my blood for to get my blood. Somebody needed to donate blood, and all of us were donating blood every night. So it wasn't like something you really volunteered for, but it was my turn, and I volunteered to give my blood for this blood type test because I didn't know what my blood type was. And they were all excited. My blood type's A negative. It was special blood type. They were all excited. But my point is this, is when we were doing it, she was showing us all the different samples they have in order to obtain blood type. So you have little ones starting with a fingerprint to a prick to taking a full blood draw and putting it into a machine. And these machines they look like supercomputers or something. And so I wonder, just putting my analysis in there, like you're saying, just training for school or labs, is now my blood type or now my DNA in this computer? It's a great question, Kim. And that was only for phlebotomy. Can you imagine someone who's like really going to school for something more intensive for medical care? I don't know. Great comments. Yeah, I didn't think I'd heard him say that. That's interesting. Never heard that before, that steroids and as human hormones change your DNA. Kip says it was on an interview with a neighbor, and I will look for it. The pool party neighbor, maybe. Martinez? And then Regina says, back to WSU mom Kim. I know I heard it with the neighbor. I wonder which neighbor. I mean, I wonder if it was neighbor and if they said in Pullman or if they were talking about back in PA. Patrick says, one of Brian's neighbors gave an interview at the beginning where he said that he had a conversation with Brian that he did a DNA ancestry test, but it hasn't been verified as fact. Bingo. We know right where it's coming from. Thank you. Okay, so that clears that up. We'll look for the early interview. Let me star that. And they didn't need a warrant for the garbage. Absolutely. The only time they would need one is if the trash was like still on their property, but it wasn't. Okay. For an OD, they don't collect DNA unless they suspect it's a crime, short of charging the seller. They would have no reason to collect and test the DNA when AFOD. Heather is correct. We were looking at Heather actually had Bicca Barlow's report emailed to me. I can pull that up too. Heather is correct. Bicca Barlow even states so much in her memorandum in support of the defense request for discovery. The sample is partial and ambiguous. I can pull that up. Hold on. Heather, this is one of the things I didn't go through, but she highlighted it before she sent it to me. So let me just put up Heather's channel. So Heather's making a lot of great comments today, and here's her channel. So please visit Heather's channel and subscribe. She is, I mean, she's not only one of my mods, but she's one of my fact checkers, and she helps bring me leads to stories, and she has some incredible content. And what's nice about Heather's channel is it's basically short form content right now. So you get like little bite-sized pieces with her stories. So it's awesome channel. Please go ahead and check it out. And the document I'm about to pull up is something Heather sent to me. It's Bicca Barlow's memorandum. Oh, it didn't send. Why don't we get through this document before I read that to you, because there is something else I wanted to show you. And then we'll get into the statistics, and we're already taking way more time than I was trying to. Let me pull this onto a different screen so you can see what I'm looking at. I'll take down Heather's banner. Okay, here we go. So Rule 16b-5 does not require the disclosure of IgG information because IgG information is not the result of a scientific test or experiment. But so Rule 16 also requires the disclosure of information related to scientific experiments, but it only applies to limited information. Namely, Rule 16 requires the disclosure of results and reports and scientific tests and experiments made in connection with the particular case. ICR 16b-5, emphasis added, this rule does not require the state to disclose what law enforcement does with the results of the reports. Moreover, a process, procedure, or investigative technique is not a scientific test or experiment, merely because it involves the comparison of information or objects or requires the use of logic or reason. And then they cite case law again. There were two types of scientific tests conducted with respect to the DNA that fall within the purview of Rule 16b-5. First, law enforcement used SDR DNA analysis to compare the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath to the defendant's father and then the defendant. As required by Rule 16b-5, the state has provided the reports from those specific tests. State also provided other information related to SDR DNA analysis because the state plans on using that information in trial. Second, the private laboratory developed the S&P profile from the DNA on the K-bar knife sheath as required by Rule 16b-5. The state will provide the report and documents. It says the state will provide the report and documents to the DNA test. But hold on a second. When we read that, it's weird because this is October. This is October 2023. I have a note in here. So this is from October of 2023, but what I'm looking at in my notes, and this comment was made by Matt in Discord, saying that Ann Taylor, the defense attorney in the Idaho 4 case, filed a motion to compel the prosecution to turn over DNA evidence January 27th of 2024. But yeah, so anyway, let's just keep going. Rule 16b-5 does not require the state to disclose how the S&P profile was used. The genetic genealogy the FBI conducted based on the DNA information does not constitute a scientific test experiment. The FBI submitted the defendant's S&P profile to one or more of the genetic genealogy services where able to view relatives and access unverified data added by users in the genetic genealogy services, starting with potential relatives. And FBI engaged in traditional genetic genealogy to put together a family tree that could lead them to the suspect. Putting together a family tree requires FBI review sources such as media, public available databases, subscription-based databases, vital records like birth certificates, census records, historical newspapers. None of those actions can be accurately but characteristically categorized as scientific test experiment. The product of the FBI's efforts with the family tree comparison of hundreds of defendants' relatives, put simply, the family tree was created by the FBI and cannot accurately be described as results or reports of scientific tests or experiments, thus falling out of the Rule 14b-5. 1 second. So there is an argument to this in this document. And I just have to look up the page number. Sorry. I wrote down the page number here. I'm going to get to the exhibits. So accompanied to this, the conclusion says, based on the above, the state respectfully prays for the court to enter an order protecting the IGG information from disclosures as it falls outside the purview of Rule 16. In the alternative, if the defense can establish the IGG information is in fact relevant, the state asks this court to conduct a requisite in-camera hearing for the state to present information related to the IGG information and enter a protective order, ICR 16.1, that the IGG information is not subject to discovery and need not be disclosed by the state. And then filed was, let me go back up here. If you look to, they exhibit some case law, and this was just interesting, something that was pointed out in Discord by Matt. If you go up to, he mentioned that there was an interesting case in here. So, and again, I'm just like you, the viewer watching this. I don't have a legal background. I know the case well because I've studied it for so long, but I am seeking to understand this from like a regular citizen or a basic person standpoint. So I do my best to sort through this information, and then I rely on, research and others. So I'm going to read this down and I'll tell you what this kind of says to me. And I'll touch base on maybe those unknown DNAs that I was just talking about earlier on in this document. And then I'll bounce it back to you guys in the chat. What I'm really focusing on is this orange highlighted area, but I'm reading all of this. So it says services provide the user with a genetic profile. The user will then upload the profile obtained from their chosen service to GED Match, a free open source public aggregator that allows the user to match with people on many different sites, not only the particular service that the individual chose. GED Match searches for sections of the user's chromosomes that match other users in the database and provides usernames with contacts information and any other genetic matches it finds, along with an estimation of how closely the relative matches. So just right there, we're talking about that statistic, that octillion, like 3, whatever octillion statistic. So it's saying they're matching it at this really high number, this 99, in layman terms, this 99.99% match. But they're not matching DNA. They're not like taking a buccal swab like we're doing at home and matching it to and sending it in and having it profiled. They're taking parts of the DNA from this GED website, this genealogy website that scours through all of the genetic testing websites, and they're looking for specific markers to pull out. I'm just saying they're looking at the non-coded human genome parts of the DNA. It's not the full profile. And I think that's where some people are saying it's a misleading statistic. But this is the part that I thought was really interesting. I highlighted in orange for you. Law enforcement officers follow the same procedure in uploading DNA to GED Match as they do regular users of the FGG investigation. But instead of submitting their own genetic profiles to GED Match, officers submit DNA recovered from an unidentified crime scene victim, often left at the crime scene. GED Match then reports back hits. Users who share DNA with the unidentified target, investigators examine those hits to try to ascertain the identity of the perpetrator of the crime. They work from the list of hits, running information through public record databases to grow family trees based on the original hits in an attempt to find leads, which ultimately yield their target's identity. Investigators must then use the means to confirm the DNA from the discovered target's matched DNA found at the scene of the crime. Law enforcement in the present case, and this is again just talking about the case law attached to this. Oh, no, this is talking about Brian's case. I'm sorry. Law enforcement in the present case obtained a mixed contributor DNA sample from the nightgown of the victim, which included DNA from the victim and the DNA from the unidentified male. A private forensic laboratory separated the unidentified male DNA. Hold on, we're talking about. So we're talking, I just want to make sure I'm being clear. We're talking about case law. Law enforcement submitted a DNA profile to the GED match and obtained information about the people who shared DNA with the unidentified suspect. Through this FGG investigation, law enforcement ultimately identified Green as the possible suspect and surreptitiously obtained items from Green's garbage that contained DNA with DNA matches and DNA profile of the unidentified male suspect. Law enforcement then obtained search warrants, arrested Green, and collected DNA samples from his saliva that matched into the source DNA. So this is the parties' contentions. Green argues that he is entitled to discover, 1, the match detail reports and the long-form candidate match reports for his hits, including partial hits and hits that are dispositioned to the non-matching, even if the laboratory has dispositioned them in a profile as a hit. 2, data files, and 3, communications with lab personnel. So this gets into chain of command, you guys, as well. And they're using this, as an argument. Oh my God, my dog is snoring so loud. Unexpected results and corrective actions. And 7, laboratory accreditations. And so it appears that in this case, these things were awarded to this guy. In his supplemental brief, Green describes what he seeks to discover as the reports that would have been generated regarding the process used to develop the crime source DNA profile. A number of matches and data related to the matches between the crime source DNA and other people's DNA contained in the GED match or other database and family tree prepared by law enforcement. In Minors Counsel Supplemental, and this is from, oh my gosh, this is so hard to read, Minor Supplemental Motion to Compel. Minors Counsel Supplemental Declaration, she again urges that the list of people identified through the FGG investigation as being related to the DNA to Green is discoverable and may lead to exculpatory evidence. And she further argues that the report and other evidence of the efforts of the people's scientists to convert the mixed contribution of DNA sample from the victim's nightgown into unsealed DNA profile appropriate for uploading to GED match is discoverable because it may have been errors in contracting and conversion process. That totally gets back into chain of command. I mean, that's like a quality control thing. Because when you get the discoverable evidence, it's not like they're delivering a little vial of DNA to you. Like, they're giving you a computer file. It's my understanding. Wouldn't you like to know that? Don't you have a right to know that that evidence was handled correctly, that there weren't any errors? And I know the argument is sometimes, well, what does it matter if they have the other buccal swab? Well, maybe that's true in another case, but in this case, we have to make sure it's fair. We have to make sure that all of Brian Kohlberger's constitutional rights were upheld in this process. It's not justice if you have to cut corners or do things that aren't fair. The system has to be fair for all of us. It has to be equal for all of us. And even if someone's creepy and obviously the person, we can't cut corners. I should shut up. Let me keep going. Delay in prosecution's prejudiced his due process rights. He needs to know the identity of other possible DNA matches that surfaced through the FGG investigation, asserting that such information might be exculpatory, and he has a right to review all persons who may have committed the crime. And FGG investigations may reveal Fourth Amendment search and seizure arguments. Hence, what I was getting at in the beginning of this program, we're talking about Brian Kohlberger's Fourth Amendment rights and his Sixth Amendment rights, his right to a fair trial, his right to face his accusers, his right to a fair and impartial jury of his peers. These are the cornerstone of this 319-page document that we just received for the motion to compel for change of venue. Okay, so let me finish because the green highlighted part is extremely important. On the other hand, the people contend, this is the other counter argument. On the other hand, the people contend that they are not obliged to produce any information provided by their FGG investigation because the people do not intend to offer any such information against screen at trial, and so it is not discoverable under Penal Code 1054.1. The information contains no exculpatory evidence that is material to Green's guilt or innocence and is not a Brady material. The information is protected from disclosure by the official information privilege, Evidence Code 1040, and the people's assertion that relevant DNA evidence is the comparison of DNA sample from Green to the crime. That's a big question, you guys. So this is what kind of gets to me is I just watched the Rust trial. Did you guys watch that? Did you catch any of it? The whole thing was thrown out because, and I didn't follow the whole case. I watched the case getting thrown out, but essentially there was these pieces of evidence that the police said, or the investigators said had nothing to do with the crime. But the defense is saying that they were, excuse me, they were exculpatory. And excuse me. So basically there were these bullets. There were these live rounds in that case. And that's a death by gun investigation. And the entire case was thrown out because, and in fact, one of the prosecutors walked away from the case 24 hours before it was thrown out because they were basically saying, it's not up to you to tell us what's exculpatory or not. You're supposed to turn over the evidence. Now, there are specific things when it comes to this type of testing that we went over at the beginning of this document. They claim that aren't important, but there is only one motivation when we talk about these things, and that is protecting BK's constitutional rights. Let me take a few of your comments, and then I'm going to wrap it up for the day, you guys. I'm going down to the bottom. Yeah, so Russ is an example of withholding evidence. I mean, it did say in that unredacted, it did say that this is dated in October, and it made it sound like all of the IgG and DNA information was turned over to the defense. It's just head scratching. What reason would they have to not turn over those unknown DNAs too? D-squared said, sealed reports are different from physical evidence. I'm going to give that one a star because I don't understand it. Those bullets were in AZ the entire time. I don't know enough about it, Twiz. I don't even really know. I just saw that last trial. I watched Lawyer You Know. So if him and his father team up and they get really excited about a case, it's always an interesting show. And that's where I saw it. I totally recommend that channel to anyone who doesn't know Peter Tragos. When the government has to prosecute you in secret using a biased grand jury and withholding exculpatory evidence, and also violate our constitutional rights to prosecute you, it's likely you're a patsy, in my opinion. Protect innocent students from the public, WSU Mom Kim says. I'm definitely going to continue this discussion in the members live stream because there's just so much to talk about. If you have the right guy, you don't need to violate their constitutional rights to prove it. The truth is like a lion. It doesn't need to be defended. Just let it loose and it will defend itself. They gave me chills. WSU Mom Kim says, I'm not saying they did anything, just that they were present when they called over. When we're talking about the morning, we're talking about before the 911 call. It could be too small a sample. SG says in his text that JD gave DNA and took a lie detector test voluntarily. Alec Baldwin, that's, you shouldn't call it the Rust trial, the Alec Baldwin trial. One second. Annie says, WSU Mom Kim, of course, HNC DNA will be there. I've always felt it was blood DNA of the two males inside that could have denied. Since the lab person found it, typed it, and just like exactly what happened. Exactly what happened in the actor's case. I forgot his name. Oh, that's when you said Alec Baldwin. Okay. Miss Anonymous says his rights have been violated over 25 times just in the grand jury process alone. This is a good comment from Heather. It's not ones and zeros. It's simple. That wasn't the one, sorry. DNA is always someone's interpretation. I would say this. Science in general is not meant to be like stagnant. Like science is always changing. If you like science cannot, there's no such thing as settled science. Like that's an oxymoron. Science can't be settled. If we learn what we know, like if you were to look at information like a graph, a piece of paper, okay? And then like say our knowledge, this is graph paper, I doubt you can see, our knowledge would be, like say our knowledge 20 years ago, it's only like these graphs, like in this corner of this piece of paper. And now we know like all the knowledge on this whole piece of paper as an analogy. So if you were to go with the science 10 years ago that were just with the knowledge of that one piece of paper, and it's not going to be the same as the knowledge when you know everything that's on the piece of paper 10 years ago. The point is this, you don't know what you don't know. Science is never settled. It is always evolving. The one key thing about science is that your work can be replicated by your peers. So when we talk about facing your accuser, that's the whole point. If it's science, then whatever we're looking at, whatever evidence we have in front of us, it should be able to be replicated by peers. And that's how you can face your accuser when it comes to science. And that's why you have experts come in. And I mean, honestly, I have probably about 4 or 5 more talking points on this, but we're already hitting that 2-hour mark. And if you would like to continue the conversation, I am doing a live stream tomorrow night at 10. and I'd love for you to join me. It's members only, but my membership is only 99 cents. So maybe you could join. And yeah, I'm going to play you an outro. Please go ahead and leave your comments. I'm going to be going through the replay and seeing everything that you say. Please check out my mods below who I've linked. The people who contributed to this information and reviewing this document, they have great channels, and they're all new and they're all growing. So, you know, be some of the first people to subscribe to them, because you're going to be seeing them around for a long time. I included, yeah. So anyway, please go down to the people I've linked below. Also check out the sources I've linked below, because there's a couple websites that you might not know about. You might glean some information off of them. And other than that, I'm going to play an outro, and I really appreciate your time today. And thank you for showing up. I just want to tell you one thing before I go. Hold on. I take down this picture. So thank you for being here. I was just thinking I'll just go ahead and drop a link in Discord, just because this is such a complex subject and it's just so interesting. And I would really like anyone who is, we had like 100 people watching, and I just thought, if you're still interested in this, stop it, Rocco. I don't know what he has in his mouth. Okay. Stop it. My dog has this technique. Just if you've never watched my live streams, he like lifts up my arm while I'm typing. All right. Let me drop a link to Discord in here. And if you'd like to continue the conversation today, we have a 24-hour chat and we're all talking about it right now. So this is my server on Discord, and we mainly just talk about the case, but it's also a friendly place. Oh, it's going to start blowing up now that I opened it. Okay. Let me drop a link to this for you. All right, so join us in Discord if you want to talk about this, if you want to share documents, or if you have anything else to say. And other than that, have a great Monday. I'll see you Tuesday night for a members only live stream. I'm going to be with True Crime Cult on Thursday night with Robert, and I also have a live stream 10 a.m. on Friday, and I have one Saturday night at 10. And I should be having a special True Crime Cult's going to be coming onto our channel. We're doing we're continuing our profiling, but we're going really, really deep with it, like years and years earlier than we've ever done before. So just stay tuned, and I'll list them all on my site. And I hope you have a great day. Or my Discord server.